Do you think we're going to see a lot more consolidation in this industry, or do you think more Bitcoin treasury companies will come to market? A couple of months ago, you would hear people in the industry say, hey, there will be thousands of these things. And if that's the case, my question is, why are more of these actually needed at this point?
Yeah, so I think there will be dozens of them launched each year in 10 years. So I my thesis has always been that this basically looks like the private equity market, which is very similar to why MicroStrategy got into this, right? Because they had the two main things that make you a target for a go private transaction for a publicly listed company in the US, which is you're cash flowing and you have a low multiple,
Hmm.
which is telling you that the market doesn't trust you to reinvest your profits in the business. They think they have better uses for the money, which is why they want to, they want you to do stock buybacks or pay a dividend, and instead of reinvest in the business. And so usually that's the 30 to 40 companies from NASDAQ and NYSE that get taken private from private equity each year. And so that's the pool that I think will choose to be on a let's increase Bitcoin per share over time instead, and choose to do that. So that's the market that I think has the uh, long term play here. In the short term, we are very far away from retail investors, which are fueling this, and from Wall Street analysts, so the research departments at the banks. We're far away from them being able to analyze and fairly value companies that have a Bitcoin treasury strategy and an unrelated operating business. There is no research department on Wall Street that can give good research for a food media company and a Bitcoin treasury company, an e-bike company and a Bitcoin treasury company, a medical device company and a Bitcoin treasury strategy, an IoT company and a Bitcoin treasury strategy. It's not going to happen. And so you basically have, I think, just, Bitcoin related financial services. MicroStrategy gets a pass because they're so big and essentially their business is creating, issuing, and marketing Bitcoin related securities. That is their job. I think that is going to be the job of all these companies that succeed and hit scale and keep going. In as much as there will be operating businesses, MicroStrategy has BI, which again doesn't matter because nobody looks at it anymore and they basically get no credit for that. If you have a shot at getting value for your operating business in addition to your Bitcoin treasury strategy and your Bitcoin pile times and MNAV, uh, I think that's only going to be if Wall Street analysts and retail are capable of giving you some credit for that, which means it better be damn close to the same theme. And so I think it'll be like Bitcoin asset management, Bitcoin financial services, things like that. And I think that's why you've seen basically every one of these companies claim that they're going to get into Bitcoin financial services someday, right? As they launch, but that's what they say they're going to do because that's what I think the market could digest. But I also don't necessarily think it's a requirement because, if you're kind of an asset manager like a Strive and essentially your business operation is going and trying to unlock cash and Bitcoin in different ways, maybe that's enough of an operating business. But you do have to have something other than just the treasury to be included in a bunch of different indices in the US. Otherwise, you're a bank holding company, and you can't do this business model.
Okay, so over time, you think we'll continue to see a wave of these come in as Wall Street and different investors are trying to basically analyze these, understand them from a valuation perspective. You think some of the differentiation might come from the actual operating businesses that they have, plus the Bitcoin, but those two should be pretty closely aligned. Um, yeah, what do you think? Like overall, like, do you think that like having so many of these will be viable over the long run though, as let's say Wall Street, different investors start to understand this? Because I'm trying to wrap my mind around, I think other people are as well. um why not just buy a MicroStrategy, or why not just buy a Meta Planet, right? To have that Japanese exposure, that regional exposure. If you're an investor and you're curious in this space, like why wouldn't it be the case that the industry essentially wouldn't shake out to just be the top one or two companies in the space?
I think it's inevitable that there will be lots and lots of them because they can be creative with different offerings, and those offerings are going to have different price points and different risk reward trade offs. And there's a bit of a law of large numbers, law of small numbers thing. So if you get one going and people take a bet on it, if it starts tiny, it's going to grow. If it does well, it'll grow faster than something that's already very large. So I think you'll always have people betting on the stock of something new, and then you'll be able to mark out different risk reward trade-offs and different durations and things like that for the prefs and for just debt offerings of different kinds. And just because MicroStrategy has successfully offered 4 perpetual preferred offerings this year doesn't mean that duration is dead as the debt financing piece of these LBEs. There's actually a much larger pool of capital out there. It's institutional capital that needs to match duration. So they actually want an instrument where the principal is going to get paid back in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. They don't want to buy this preferred stream. The preferreds are great because that's really popular with retail because it's kind of replacing their yield bearing money market accounts or their dividend stocks or their whatever life insurance or something, or treasuries. Basically, it's like people are thinking of it as like a treasury that pays 10% instead of 4%. Seems like a better deal. But I think there's so much room for other flavors of offerings, and MicroStrategy is not going to do everything.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. The product differentiation there. MSTR can't do everything, of course. And maybe the last point on this, but I'm just really trying to understand this. So, like, if I were to think of like a Walmart, right? You have your Walmart, you have your Costco. You know, um, you think about most industries, there's usually, and that's probably the wrong example. It's like Walmart, Target, but you think about most industries, it's usually one big player, and then you have like your second option, and then maybe a third or fourth. And then when it comes to investors, they typically want to own the top two in the space. So I would imagine, even though you're making a great point that there will be new products that need to come to market, I would imagine that over time there would be some sort of saturation, and even 10 companies seems like too many. You know, two, three, maybe four over time. I can see your point though about new ones always maybe trying to come to market to compete with the incumbents, but in terms of long-term sustainability, it's a little hard to see how we could have so many of these and how so many of these products will be needed, that we need so many companies to bring them to market.
All right. So Tom Lee, founder of Fundstrat, regular CNBC guest, spent 7 or 8 years talking about Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. He got himself yachts for the next 4 or 5 generations of Lees, getting paid out by Joe Lubin and friends to
Hey, Tom Lee's the GOAT. You've heard it. You've heard that.
become a meth shill. So he's shilling Vitalik coin now. Um, do you believe everything that Tom Lee says is exactly what he actually believes when he's on TV now?
I don't believe, no, I mean, you want to question everything. I think you want to question everything. I do think that what he's been saying in particular makes sense, and that it could be possible. It'd be hard to refute to just straight up just refute what he's saying. He's
Oh,
making
it's so easy to refute everything that he's saying. My point is, he just spent 7 years saying the opposite, saying that there was no thesis for ETH, and now because he has the yachts, he's saying that there's a thesis for ETH.
Oh, no, that's not the case.
It
He
is.
has been no, he's put out research and has come out and said that he's been long both Bitcoin and Ethereum since, I believe, like 2017. I think Bitcoin was 2017 and ETH might have been around that time or a
Tiny,
little.
tiny, tiny little bit, but he only was bullish about Bitcoin publicly. And he's a friend of mine. I've known him personally for many years, going back to 2019. So my point is, people talk their books. And so what you have in this Bitcoin treasury space is 2 very loud, large participants in Bitcoin Magazine and in Bitwise that, for their own ends, for a long time, and this was actually very good for Saylor and MicroStrategy as well, to promote the idea that there would only need to be one per market. Bitwise did this because they were losing AUM to MicroStrategy, and they wanted to make sure that the bleeding would stop there. And so they decided it was in their interest to promote, and this was Jeff at the time, along with Matt and the crew, to promote the idea that there would just be one Bitcoin treasury company per market. That then became David Bailey and Bitcoin Magazine's strategy, was to kind of use the conference and their megaphone with the media and everything to go and like promote one per market and try to be the champion of each market and kind of like anoint the winner and then market it with the conferences and the media, et cetera. When it became obvious that Saylor would have too much of a target on his back if he was the only one in the US, and that by far the bigger risk was being singled out and having bad things done to him, it was in his interest to promote as many of these as possible in the US so that he'd have friends and it would look like regulators or legislators were like taking out an industry, and it would be very like un-American to take out that industry. And he needed other people to go to bat alongside him in these various negotiations to get rid of like corporate alternative minimum gains tax and like, favorable tax treatment for FASB, et cetera, et cetera. So he needed friends, right? And it's actually very much in his benefit to have a bunch of shats out there running around looking for the same thing, the shitcoin asset treasuries, because those are the guys that actually bought DC. They paid for 48% of the last election cycle. And those are the guys, trying to pump their coins and trying to pretend that there's actually still, some kind of store of value thesis for shitcoins, and, that they want yield in these, token stocks or whatever the fuck. So they're going really hard at that. But that's actually very beneficial to Saylor, because it means that you have this protective shield of the shitcoin money, where they have a lot more money in general because they print their tokens out of thin air and just give it to themselves. So they can pay off lobbyists like nobody's business. They can pay off legislatures and, just like buy elections like very, very easily. And so he recruited a bunch of these people by just not even being friendly, and he still backhands the shit out of them from the stage, but it's like very sneaky. And he doesn't say the things that he used to say about crypto. All he says is like they're a different asset class. And that's the worst thing he says. That's not the types of things he was saying from 2020 to 2023.
Yeah, he used to say they would be labeled securities, but that didn't actually happen.
Not just that they would be labeled securities, but that they would all go to zero, et cetera, et cetera. It was very aggressive, right? But, for survival and for, really I think he honestly believes that, and I think he's right. Personally, I also agree that what MicroStrategy is doing is opening up the financialization of Bitcoin and the tranching of Bitcoin returns into, various flavors of risk reward revenue streams or, investment returns. Like, it is a good thing that he's doing, and he's just playing some 4D chess, kind of jujitsuing and using all the energy of the other Bitcoin treasury companies and the entire crypto complex to further his goals and further entrench Bitcoin in the financial system and in the regulatory complex so that it can't be fucked with. So broadly, like, very, very successful strategy to kind of co-opt the money and energy of the crypto people in service of Bitcoin. So he needs lots of these companies all clamoring for the same thing so that he can be protected by the crowd and not have strategy get singled out. As Bitwise saw that this was happening, they flipped. So they flipped late last year, and they decided, you know what, it looks like a lot of these are coming. We're going to serve them. We're going to play with them. We're going to, change our narrative and slowly back away from the table of saying that there's only going to be one per market, and we'll roll with it too. And we'll create, an ETF that will hold all these Bitcoin treasury companies, and we'll create another ETF that holds their debt and go market that. And so they started doing that in December, January. And of course that co-opted Jeff's brain, and he ended up having to get into the space full time because he saw that that's where things were going. And now he's running one. And I think MAG is like the last one to fall because they obviously are like deep into their marketing and their strategy about having a national champion in all these different markets. And that's not going to work either, because
Which company is this?
Bitcoin Magazine.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so that's not going to work either. There's going to be multiple in all these markets. If there's a good market for Bitcoin treasury companies because there's an arbitrage for some reason, then there will be multiple competitors. So you saw the SoftBank backed competitor to MetaPlanet launch a couple of weeks ago. And so that I think will do great because it's, obviously it's a great market for this play, and you've got somebody that's starting off of a smaller base, and it's going to get a lot of people betting on it, and we'll see what happens. And I think there will be multiple in Sweden, and there's already multiple in the UK. There will be multiple in France. There'll be multiple in Brazil, and there's no reason that there should be, just one in any of these markets where it's an attractive play.
Sure, sure. Okay, Corey, you feel very strongly that there'll be many of these, and that many in the same region can succeed over time.